The young child pursued the small horse that dawned, discovering something in the ravine that would alter their destiny forever. Blue Mesa, Colorado Territory, late winter of 1884. Ice crystals still clung to the meadow grass, while the morning sun cast long shadows from the western peaks. Martha Henderson crouched beside the northern boundary, mallet gripped firmly, forcing a twisted plank back into position. Her mittens showed wear at the thumb tips, spare iron fasteners jingling. In her coat pocket, each repaired section meant another day of security. This barrier might contain the livestock where they belonged. Mother the mare is heading toward the gulch. Martha's head snapped upward. She saw Lucy near the stable, her tiny fingers gesturing toward the distant grazing area. "Remain here, Lucy." "It's far too perilous," Martha shouted, anxiety sharpening her tone. "But I can retrieve her." Lucy's response came softly, as uncertain. Before Martha could offer another protest, the child pivoted and sprinted away, her leather boots stirring up clouds of frozen earth. "Lucy," Martha abandoned the mallet and gave chase, her dress catching on a jagged fence splinter as she vaulted over the small hill. Clover. Their chestnut mare moved at a gentle canter ahead of Lucy, her mane flowing freely. The lead rope from her bridle dragged through the soil, following the winding trail toward the ravine. Martha's stomach clenched with dread. That ravine spelled danger, sheer cliffs, unstable rocks, and fissures in the ground deep enough to claim a person's life. Her late husband had warned her that one wrong step in that place could prove fatal. When she glimpsed Lucy again, the child was already descending halfway down the path into the ravine, her short stride quick and resolute. Clover had disappeared. Around a curve, Lucy halted immediately. Martha's call bounced off the stone walls, yet the little girl continued forward, without looking back. As Martha navigated the bend herself, she discovered Lucy kneeling in the earth, paying no attention to the mare whatsoever. Clover stood several yards distant, head lowered, investigating something resting in the shade of a boulder formation. A stranger lay there, rested on his back, his jacket ripped at the elbow, a dark patch spreading across the fabric. One arm was twisted unnaturally, and a deep cut marked his jaw. Close by, the torn remnants of riding gear scattered in the dust, the stirrup leather severed cleanly. Blood trails led down the path, mixed with the jagged marks of horseshoes, suggesting a violent encounter had occurred. Lucy gazed upward. "Mother. He's injured terribly. He won't respond." Martha knelt swiftly, clearing grit from his cheek. His flesh felt cold, yet a heartbeat remained, weak but regular. His features, though marked by blood, appeared strong beneath the whiskers. Whoever this was, he hadn't been here long. "We must assist him," Lucy declared, her voice quiet but determined. Martha surveyed the area. No companion rider. No trace of whoever had caused this harm. The ravine remained silent, save for the distant cry of a buzzard. Lucy fumbled with the cord of her small water container. It's the one she carried when chasing Clover around the homestead. She unscrewed it with both hands and tilted it toward the stranger's mouth. "Lucy," that's Martha started, but paused as she watched the liquid trickle into his mouth. "He needs water," Lucy whispered, though Martha noticed her own lips appeared parched and split. Martha drew a deep breath, then removed her woolen wrap from her shoulders, draping it over the man and tucking it around his form to preserve what little warmth remained. The breeze carried scents of earth and wild herbs, sharp in her nostrils. "Come along, darling," she said softly. "We're bringing him to our home." Clover pricked her ears as if comprehending, and Martha began planning how to transport an unconscious stranger from a ravine using only rope, a horse, and the stubborn determination that had sustained her and Lucy these past 3 years. The ravine wind sliced bitter and harsh as Martha dropped beside Lucy. The young girl sat in the dirt, small palm resting on the forearm of a man collapsed partially in shadow. He appeared to be in his late 20s, broad-chested beneath a weather-beaten leather coat, now stained with blood at the elbow and across his jaw. Lucy stepped backward, stirred briefly. She said quickly, her eyes scanning over him. Then he closed his eyes once more. Martha placed 2 fingers against his throat, a pulse faint but present. Her initial impulse was to rush for assistance, to summon Marshal Brady, or anyone from the settlement who could handle an unconscious outsider. She didn't recognize this man. He might represent trouble. Then his eyelids trembled, and for the briefest instant, his stare met hers. She saw no menace in it, only a raw, wordless appeal. Something in that faint, desperate expression made her hesitate. "Very well," she murmured to herself. "We won't abandon you here." She glanced up the incline they had descended. The trail was narrow, littered with loose gravel. Extracting him would prove difficult, but leaving him meant he might not survive another 2 hours. "Lucy, fetch the rope from Clover's tack," she directed. The little girl hurried to comply. Martha wound the rope carefully beneath the man's arms. Grimacing as he groaned softly, she secured it to Clover's small but solid frame, then took the lead herself, pulling while the mare stepped forward. Step by step, they hauled him up the slope, Martha digging her boots into the earth for leverage. Lucy tugged beside her with all the force her small frame could provide. By the time they reached the top of the ravine, Martha's shoulders ached, her breathing sharp in her chest. Clover stood panting, ears twitching anxiously. "Just a little further," she told Lucy, and together they managed to half-lift. Half-dragged the man toward the dwelling inside. She cleared the kitchen table with one sweep of her arm and eased him onto it. His head rolled to one side, a fresh streak of blood marking her sleeve. "Lucy, bring the clean cloths from the cupboard," Martha said, reaching for the wash basin. She poured water from the kettle, steam rising into the chilly room. With swift, practiced motions, she cleaned the wound at his jaw, then tore a strip from an old pillowcase to bind it. The elbow wound ran deeper. She packed it with fabric and tied it firmly. As she worked, her hand brushed against something beneath his coat. She reached inside and withdrew a small weathered leather wallet. The initials TM were stamped into the cover. Beneath it, tucked into an inner pocket, was an aged brass badge, tarnished with time. But still bearing the inscription of the Colorado Cattlemen's Association, she studied it for a moment. That badge identified a man of substance. Someone who controlled livestock in significant numbers, perhaps thousands of head. What was such a person doing wounded and alone in a ravine? The man shifted, his lips moving. "Bandits ... took the cattle to my mount." The words were barely audible before he slipped back into unconsciousness. Martha straightened slowly, her mind working. Whoever this man was, danger had discovered him. And now, whether she welcomed it or not, he lay in her kitchen. And his peril might not be far away. The aroma of pine smoke and black coffee hung in the modest kitchen, threading through the weathered timber beams and settling into the room's recesses like a familiar presence. Martha was stoking the fire when a low moan caught her ear. She turned, just as the stranger's eyelids opened, revealing eyes clouded with pain and bewilderment. His gaze gradually swept the confined space before settling on her. Then, as if guided by some unspoken signal, it moved to Lucy, who sat cross-legged on the floor, gently grooming Clover's coat with careful strokes. "What place is this?" His voice was hoarse, worn raw by thirst and fatigue. "You're in my house," Martha said calmly, wiping her palms on her apron near Blue Mesa, Colorado. He shifted slightly, wincing as the movement pulled at the bandage. Wrapped around his elbow. "I'm Thomas Mitchell," he managed. "I own the Sunset Valley Ranch about 40 miles south of here." Martha's eyebrows rose in surprise. "That's quite a distance from this ravine." Thomas's jaw tightened with quiet anger. "I was herding a small group of prize cattle toward the market when they attacked without warning, hooded riders heavily. Armed, stole the animals, the equipment, everything. Left me to die." Lucy's bright eyes looked up at him with curiosity. Evil men. Thomas's mouth curved into a faint, tired smile despite the pain carved across his features. The worst sort. Martha folded her arms, her thoughts spinning with conflicting concerns. A man like this, wealthy enough to own a vast ranch, could bring peril directly to her doorstep. Blue Mesa was a tiny settlement. News of his presence would travel swiftly, and that could spell trouble. He should be under a physician's care, she said carefully. Or at least at the marshal's station. Thomas shook his head firmly. I need to be pursuing them. Every moment I'm bedridden, they gain more distance. I can't allow them to vanish into the wilderness. He swung one leg off the table where he had been lying, attempting to push himself upright. The exertion drained the color from his cheeks, and he slumped back slightly. Martha moved swiftly, placing her steady hands on his uninjured shoulder to support him. You're in no condition to travel. From the floor, Lucy spoke up with remarkable wisdom for her years. You can't pursue evil men if you can't even sit upright. Thomas glanced down at the little girl, blinking in amazement as she offered him a small piece of cornbread from her dish. Here, Mother says food gives you strength. His eyes grew soft with appreciation, and for a moment, some of the tension left his face. He accepted the bread slowly, savoring it as if it were a banquet. Martha allowed the quiet to stretch before speaking again. Oh, you'll remain here until you're stable enough to stand without stumbling, several days at minimum. Thomas's voice carried reluctance, but the sharp edge had disappeared. I dislike being confined, he admitted. On one condition, Martha continued. No one in the settlement learns about you. Not the marshal, not the merchant, no one. Thomas studied her, curiosity sharpening his tone. Why? If they discover I'm still alive, they'll return to complete their work, he explained quietly. I'd prefer they assume their task is finished. After a lengthy pause, Martha nodded decisively. Agreed. You'll recuperate here. But understand my daughter and I live quietly. I won't have danger bleeding into our existence. Thomas met her gaze steadily, respect glowing through his wariness. I don't intend to bring you harm, Mrs. Henderson, she provided. Mrs. Henderson, he repeated, bowing his head in acknowledgement. Then we have an agreement. Lucy beamed brightly at the exchange, clearly delighted with her part in preventing the stranger from departing half-dead. Martha, however, kept her thoughts protected, wondering what manner of person could lose everything in a ravine and still carry such quiet determination in his expression. The weeks that followed developed into a pattern Martha hadn't anticipated. Each dawn she would discover Thomas awake early, seated at the table with a cup of coffee Lucy had proudly prepared for him, half filled with grounds, because she hadn't yet perfected the technique. He endured it without complaint, expressing gratitude each time, his elbow mended gradually under Martha's attentive care. She heated water, replaced the dressings, and monitored the wound for signs of infection. You've done this previously, he observed one evening, as she secured the final strip of clean fabric in place. I had no choice, she answered quietly. When my husband lived, the closest physician was 2 days' journey. You acquire what skills you must. By the 6th day, he insisted on accomplishing more than sitting at the table. You have a boundary fence that appears to be standing through sheer willpower, he said, nodding toward the rear pasture. Martha wavered, but soon she spotted him. There, with a hammer in hand, moving more cautiously than he probably wished her to observe, Lucy accompanied him, holding nails and chattering about Clover's mischievous behavior. He also began providing Lucy brief instruction in horsemanship. The secret is earning her confidence, he told her, as the little mare snorted beneath the saddle, not by yanking hard on the reins, but by showing her you're reliable. Lucy glowed, echoing his words as if they were sacred truth. One frigid afternoon, Martha hitched the cart and traveled into Blue Mesa for provisions. At the general store, while measuring grain, she overheard 2 cowhands speaking in hushed tones near the wood stove. Heard tell that gang's still in the area, one said, tying up loose ends. Don't want any survivors walking into the marshal's office. Martha kept her expression neutral, but her pulse quickened. She completed her purchases hastily and returned home, the echo of their words pursuing her along the frozen trail. That night, after Lucy had retired, Martha found a newly sharpened blade resting just inside the rear entrance. Out. She recognized the grip, but the steel gleamed in the lamplight. Thomas sat by the hearth, running a whetstone across his own hunting knife. He didn't glance up when she entered. She understood without asking that he had honed hers, and that he had positioned it there intentionally. Planning to carve meat in the kitchen? She asked casually. Just thought it should be prepared, he said, continuing to work the stone along the edge. She didn't question him further. The action spoke volumes. He had heard similar rumors or sensed the threat, and rather than discuss it, he had equipped her to confront it. Later, as she banked the coals for the night, Martha found herself observing him from across the room. His strength was evident enough, but it was this silent vigilance, the way he protected without ceremony, that stirred something within her. It had been ages since anyone had considered her safety before their own. It was near sunset when Martha heard the sharp clatter of hooves in the yard. She stepped onto the porch, drying her hands on her apron. Just as Clover trotted in from the eastern pasture, the direction of the ravine, the little mare's sides were streaked with clay, and the saddle sat crooked, leather straps marked by long, fresh tears. Thomas appeared at her side before she could summon him. His gaze swept over the mare, and his expression hardened. "That's not from wandering in the meadow," he said, running a palm over the saddle's scarred edge. "These are recent, and this claravine clay. I recognize it anywhere." Martha frowned. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting," he replied, low and certain, "that someone has been near your property today. And if Clover returned from the ravine in this condition, it wasn't merely a traveler passing through. The gang that stole my cattle, they may be, moving through here again." Without another word, he grabbed his coat and hat. "I'm going to investigate for myself." "I'm accompanying you," Martha said quickly. "You are not," he countered. "If they're still nearby, I won't put you and Lucy in their path." A small voice interrupted them from the doorway. "I want to come," Lucy said, clutching the porch rail. Martha shook her head. "No, sweetheart. Stay inside." They reached a compromise, bringing Lucy inside and instructing her to keep the door barred until they returned. Then Martha and Thomas lead Clover toward the ravine, following the hoof prints in the moist earth. The sun was sinking low, shadows stretching across the rocky terrain. When they reached the entrance to the ravine, Thomas slowed, examining the ground. "Here," he murmured, crouching beside a patch of disturbed earth. The tracks were deep, the shape unmistakable to an experienced rancher. 5 horses, shod-like, the ones that fled with my herd. Same spacing, same dimensions. Martha crouched beside him, her pulse accelerating. "So it is them. I'd wager my life on it," he said grimly. For a long moment, he stared down the ravine trail, his jaw set. "I ride tonight. I might overtake them before they gain too much distance." "You're not strong enough yet," Martha said firmly. "You can barely lift a fence rail without grimacing. What happens if you encounter them, and you're not ready?" "I can't delay indefinitely," he replied. "Every day I remain here is another day." They increased their lead. Lucy's voice startled them both. She had followed quietly to the stable and now stood just behind them, her eyes wide. "If you get injured again," she said softly, "Mother will be sorrowful." Thomas turned, the hard edge in his face softening. "Lucy, .. She looked down at her boots. "You promised you would teach me to ride better. Can't do that if you leave. And get hurt." For a moment no one spoke. Then Thomas drew a slow breath, straightened, and gave a single nod. "All right," he said. "I'll wait, but I'm not wasting the time." Over the following days he quietly assembled supplies: a coil of rope, a box of ammunition, preserved food, and a bedroll. He spent the mornings assisting Martha with tasks, the afternoons walking the fence line, scanning the horizon. Martha pretended not to notice the preparations, but she felt the change in the atmosphere, like a storm gathering far away, too distant to hear, but close enough to sense. And Thomas remained, for now, his watchful presence as constant as the peaks beyond the ravine. The downpour had been steady since nightfall, persistent and icy, transforming the yard into a maze of mud and slippery grass. Martha had just finished securing the fire when she heard it, the dull, irregular sound of hooves, too many for a single rider. Then came the harsh laughter, drifting through the night air like the scent of smoke before a fire. Lucy shifted in, her sleep as Martha crossed the room and peered through the curtain. Silhouettes moved against the darkness. 4, maybe 5 men on horseback. Lantern light reflecting off wet coats and the gleam of metal. The door exploded inward before she could react. crashing against the wall. A stocky man entered, water streaming from the edge of his hat. His eyes roamed over the room before fixing on her. "Evening, lady," he drawled. "We'll be taking whatever provisions you've got, and you're going to tell us where you're hiding that." "Fellow Mitchell." Martha's heart hammered hard in her chest. "I don't know anyone by that name." One of the others, tall, gaunt with a scar twisting around his mouth, seized her by the wrist. "I'll recall soon enough if we give you cause." Before she could respond, the leader's head jerked toward the sound of hooves pounding up fast from the shadows. Out of the darkness and rain, a horse charged forward, Thomas Mitchell in the saddle, drenched to the skin, his hat pulled low, eyes locked on the man gripping Martha. He didn't call out. He didn't warn. One smooth motion, he dismounted, caught the leader's shoulder, and dragged him clean from his saddle. The man struck the ground with a thud, and before he could reach for his weapon, Thomas had twisted it from his grasp and pressed him face first into the mud. Chaos exploded. The scar-faced man turned toward Lucy's bedroom door, but Martha was already in motion. Her fingers closed around the knife Thomas had sharpened days earlier and left on the shelf by the fireplace. She slashed at the rope binding her wrists, then lunged forward, severing the cord the tall man was fumbling with to block.